This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
You're listening to the Pretend You're Fired Today podcast. And now, here's your host, Lisa Rangel.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to the 25th episode of the Pretend You're Fired Today podcast. I'm Lisa Rangel, the very grateful host of the Pretend You're Fired Today podcast and founder of Chameleon Resumes. We are an executive resume writing, LinkedIn profile development, and job search consultancy firm that help executives and high potential leaders land their next position faster. And today's podcast show topic will address 3 specific cultural fit interview questions that you can prepare for to answer on the interview. We're going to address 3 specific questions that will help you demonstrate to a company that you are interviewing with that you are a solid cultural fit for their organization beyond your qualifications. So this way you become a job offer magnet. I had an HR consultant reach out to me recently and ask me how we prepare candidates for cultural fit interview questions. And essentially, she wanted to know a list of questions that we use to prepare our clients when companies want to determine if someone is a good culture fit for their organization. And this is the part of the interview process when a company's already determined that your qualifications are suitable. Now the hiring manager wants to see if you're a cultural fit within the organization, if you're going to assimilate into their organization pretty well. So we have a minimum of about a dozen questions that we ask, and we're going to address 3 today that we prepare clients for. But this first one that I'm going to bring up is my personal favorite to ask. So let me set the stage. Like I said earlier, this typically happens at the end of the interview cycle. Things are looking good. Everybody's feeling like this could be a good match. And at this point, I will ask, all right, so let's be blunt. We all have a downside. We all have a weakness, a quirk, whatever you want to call it, that we're all going to eventually find out about each other if you start working here. So, and you're going to find out about us too. So what's the one thing that I'm going to learn about you in due time? Can you give me a heads up about it? That's the question. What would your answer be? Frankly, I find those that are diplomatic but humble and vulnerable to a certain degree are the most likely to be believed. And to put the candidate at ease, I'll even start with one of mine. And I'll tell you one of mine right now. So one of my quirks is when I'm writing or doing a project that requires a lot of thought, in my mind, I can't be interrupted. I get really flustered when I get interrupted. So it's not that I don't want an open door policy, but because I don't want to talk to people, it's because I don't want an open door policy because I don't want to be interrupted. During those times, I need to work in an extremely focused manner. So I acknowledge this about myself and I block out time and I do my best to ensure the blocks work with the culture of my group. So it's not an imposition, but admittedly, sometimes the blocks are inconvenient for others, or I just genuinely need to be interrupted and I get frustrated. So it's nothing bad, it's nothing extreme, but knowing that I think and work like that at times can be a good thing for the group to know and for my fellow coworkers to know. I'll put somebody at ease with one of my quirks. A good way to start to come up with an answer for this question for yourself is, what do people often say about you and your work habits? What do the coworkers comment on about you and your work flow, your work performance, and your work habits? These answers are the foundation for you to craft your answer to a question like, and to mention the answers, to mention your quirk, as long as you know it won't be taken negatively. But here's the thing. If it is taken negatively, despite your best efforts, you have to realize you may have actually dodged a bullet if they don't hire you, because if they're not going to appreciate that quirk of yours once you start working, it's going to be highly uncomfortable for you to work there. So obviously use discretion, but just know that the key is to find the right place, not just a place, right? That's, to me, one of the favorite questions I like to ask. Another question to be ready for is, what's your greatest weakness? Now, this is a rookie question. When someone asks this question, it's a sign of an inexperienced interviewer who read the interview book of how should I interview this next person I'm going to interview. But it is what it is, and you need to be ready. And we're going to even talk about how to deal with an inexperienced interviewer in a later episode. But I find the best way to answer this is to use a topic or a task that you may need training on. Or another way to handle the question is to bring up something that you used to suffer from, but you've taken steps to overcome. An example of the latter could be you used to have strong aversion to public speaking, but you've taken classes and you've practiced and you've signed yourself up for presentations at work and outside of work. And now, while you may not be 100% comfortable with it, it's not something that you're having panic attacks over any longer. If the interviewer is insistent on something current, then I suggest to choose something that could be part of your professional development, something that you may need training on, and you're not good at it. It's a weakness only because you haven't been able to demonstrate it as much as you'd like. So that could be a way of presenting something unique, but it's still not going to be a topic that will impede your work performance. So that's the key. You want to make sure that you're picking something that's not a paramount element to the job that you're interviewing for. And lastly, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of questions, but another cultural interview question could be, again, at the end, why should we hire you? The answer to this question needs to be a hybrid of how you would deliver the needed result the company is seeking by making this hire and how you will mesh well with the culture by citing some traits or work habit synergies. You don't want to answer this question based on you. You don't want to answer this question based on your interest and your awesomeness and you're the most credentialed. That's all about you. You need to answer this question in a way that shows that you are the most applicable candidate for the job based on what the company's looking to hire in terms of the result they want and the culture. So they know that they're not going to have any conflicts amongst the staff. So when you answer this question focused on these 2 points of result relevancy and cultural assimilation, in addition to being qualified, you're going to be hard to pass up. You're going to be a very interesting candidate for them to consider. This is the secret to a solid mindset in crushing the next interview. Speaking in specifics about each phase of the experience that you've had and traits that you embody that are reflective in the culture of the company that you're interviewing with. Let the person relate to you due to the detail that you give in describing these traits that you have and how you've demonstrated these traits in past interviews that you've had. Next, I want you to go to interviewprepsheet.com. Download our prep sheet to be ready for the next session and to follow up on what we've discussed today. On the prep sheet, we have additional interview tactics and strategies for you to nail the next interview as well as nail the next performance review that you have. These tactics help with existing positions where you're looking to get promoted and get a favorable performance review that can lead to a higher increase. So again, go to interviewprepsheet.com, get that prep sheet. In past episodes on our podcast, we've talked about the only way to truly protect yourself from job loss is to pretend you're fired today, make a list of the activities that you would do while you're working and start to do them slowly while you're working. Doing these proactive activities to keep yourself in demand when you don't need a job is the key element to the Pretend You're Fired Today podcast action list. You keep your networks primed, active, so this way you stay in the forefront of your network's mind to create demand for yourself consistently. You want to be in demand when you need it. So in order for that to happen, you need to build the demand before you need it. This way, if your job situation changes unexpectedly and suddenly, you have already built pent-up demand for what you do by doing these actions that we talked about today in this podcast as well as in the prior podcast. For the next few episodes of the Pretend You're Fired Today podcast, we're going to continue to go through a list of tactics and activities that you can do now as if you were let go today from your job unexpectedly to ensure that you're always ready for whatever the world brings your way. The first item on the list was your resume. Get that up to speed. We covered that in episodes 1 through 8. The second item on the list was updating your LinkedIn profile, which you can review in episodes 9 through 12. And in the last dozen or so episodes, some of the topics we covered were how to work with recruiters, how to make job boards work for you. We've spoken about star and car stories and how to build those stories to boost your interview performance or performance review performance. This way you can crush that meeting and get the results that you want from it. I'm so proud of you for taking these next steps, making yourself marketable when you don't need it. Most people wait. They stick their head in the sand. They think it's not going to happen to them, and they wait for that unexpected job change to happen. And then they start to learn this information and put it to use. And now they got the pressure of not working and learning something different all at the same time. It's just a lot of unnecessary pressure. So kudos to you for learning and doing this before you need it. My friend saved me with her priceless advice, Pretend You're Fired Today, and I'm paying it forward with you. I ask you to pay this sentiment forward and share it with as many executives and rising professionals who you feel would benefit from this build the demand before you need it advice. Doing the preparation suggested in this episode will prepare you to interview confidently. The key is anticipating all of these questions and being ready for them. In our next episodes, we are going to discuss how to create an elevator pitch. So you're always prepared to talk about yourself confidently. And to start, go to interviewprepsheet.com, download our interview prep sheet to be ready for the next episode. We will discuss how to develop an effective elevator pitch that you are comfortable using. That's the key, right? Comfort. Tune in for the next episode. Don't miss it. Until then, go to interviewprepsheet.com and download the prep sheet to be ready for the next session and to reinforce what we've discussed today. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Be well.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.